takes a minute to get this to come up. There we go.
There we go. Good.
Hello, everybody. Tonight I'm going to talk to you about an unloved bird, the turkey vulture, a fascinating scavenger and nature's cleanup crew. In North America, we have two widespread species of vultures. Of course, the turkey vulture we're going to talk about is the most widespread, but we also have a second species, the black vulture, that I will just mention briefly in the talk. The turkey vulture ranges from southern Canada to the southern tip of South America. So it's not only in North America, it's in Central and South America. And it's on many offshore islands. They migrate in much of North America. And on the range map, you can see at the top, it's all this yellow area. It's just where they breed in the summer, but they leave in the winter and migrate, in our case, southward. The scientific name for turkey vulture is Cathartes aura. Cathartes is from the Greek for a purifier, and aura is probably derived from a Latin aurum for gold because of the head of many museum specimens, but it could also be a Latinized version of a native South American word for vultures. And there are, as we'll learn later on, there are many words for vultures in the rest of the Americas. But they've also been called buzzard or turkey buzzard, but this is a misnomer. Buzzard was the common name of the buteo of Europe, which is now called common buzzard. And this is the bird that occurs in England, where the first settlers, the first European settlers, came to North America, and they don't have vultures in England. And so when they saw the turkey vulture flying over, they thought it was the common buzzard or the buzzard that they had regularly back in England. Now we have to remember at that time there were no ornithologists, no bird watchers, no binoculars, no field guides, and so therefore it was just common knowledge of what you saw out there. But anyhow, this name has stuck, and so they're called buzzards by many people in North America, although this is slowly dying away. But buzzard has come to have a negative connotation, mainly because turkey vultures and black vultures are carrion eaters, and they're thought to be vile creatures. However, that's changing. Many people nowadays do not think of vultures as such vile creatures. There's a bumper sticker that says, "I love turkey vultures." Hinkley, Ohio has a celebration of their migration return in the spring. And here's a book that was written about a turkey vulture, The Private Life of an Unloved Bird. And here we see a logo for a bluegrass festival of a turkey vulture playing a banjo. Turkey vultures are also used regularly in raptor education programs. So many of the raptor rehabilitation centers have an education program where they use some of the birds that they're rehabbing, some of which can't be released in the wild, to educate the public about birds. And vultures work real well. And in fact, there's a whole organization devoted to vulture conservation, but use of vultures in raptor education. And they have put out a pamphlet on this. And you can get that pamphlet if you can take a screenshot or write real quickly to this URL, or you can just Google vulture education pamphlet. And so places that rehab raptors and give raptor education shows regularly lose turkey vultures. This is one called Stuart Side. And even black vultures are used. Victor is here in Texas, Wildlife Reveal. And he has the line when he comes out there, he says, "I hope you don't use the B word for this beauty," B being buzzard. We call them vultures like they should be called. September 5th now is a Vulture Appreciation Day. And this is to get out to the public that vultures are not the malevolent creatures preying on the sick and weary, but are further from the truth. And they're really a scavenging crew, and they have their own beauty. So our turkey vulture has a bare red head, and talk about that in a minute. It flies with its wings in a dihedral. That means two angles, or a V, you can say. And it has pink legs, and the underwings are two-toned, with the underwing coverts being dark and the flight feathers being silvery. They fly with their wings in a V, usually rocking, because they have very light wing loading. That means for each square area of the wing, there's not much weight. So they can fly in fairly light winds. Sometimes, particularly when the winds are strong, they don't fly with their wings in a V, but in a W, like this bird. The juveniles of turkey vultures don't have a red head. They have a dark head and they have a dark beak. And the beak, when they first come, has a little bit of light at the base. And as they grow older, that light expands. It's just like your fingernail growing out. And so by the time they're almost 1 year old, they have a pale beak, but with a dark tip. They're called turkey vultures because of the adult's red head, because the wild turkey has a red head. The appearance of turkey vultures depends on the light conditions. So this is a bird that we can see flying in normal, good light. But if there is snow on the ground or white sand and that sun is way up high above us and there's a good strong reflection, then the bird can light up from below. Likewise, if the sun is down low and the substrate below is dark and non-reflective, the bird can appear quite dark. All of these birds are pretty much the same, but they don't look the same because of the light conditions. Turkey vultures form roosts at night, particularly in the wintertime. These roosts can be in towers, or they can be in woodlots, and they're thought to be an information center for finding carrion. So if you're a turkey vulture and you're out there soaring around and you haven't found anything to eat, or you haven't, and I'll tell you how they find stuff in a minute. And later on, as it comes late in the day, you see a roost and you go over and you join the roost. The next morning, the birds fly out from the roost, and the ones that know where the prey is, where the carrion is, they go out first and they go out directly. So those that don't know follow them. And so then it's thought to be a place for finding food. Now, a side effect from roosting communally is that the vultures above you, if you're roosting down in the lower part, may relieve itself during the night. You can see some whitewash on this bird. And you can see lots of whitewash on that bird. This turns out to be not detrimental to the birds as they bathe. They probably bathe every day because of this, or just because they're in pretty nasty stuff and they want to clean their feathers. Turkey vultures, as I mentioned, in much of North America are migratory, and they join up in big flocks and they fly south in the autumn and then back to the spring, back north to the spring, and back north in the spring. Many of them go into South America, where they are distinguished by their plumage from the native birds in South America and Central America too. So these vultures here in this picture are in a thermal, gaining altitude. They're in an elevator going up, you could think of. When they get to the top of that, they turn to the direction they want to glide, and they start gliding. And all of this is accomplished without any wing beats. So it's very energetically efficient. And they go for quite a distance until they find the next thermal. And it's thought, because there's so many of them and they spread out over the sky, that this aids them in finding the next thermal. Because if you're flying along and you're on the right-hand side of the mass of vultures going on, and you look around and you see birds on the left-hand side all of a sudden start circling and going up, you know they found a thermal, so you turn and you join that thermal. And anyhow, they can accomplish this without any wing beats and just using just barely as much energy as the basic requirements for each day. A group of turkey vultures is called a venue. That's a word I didn't know until somebody showed me that. So they're able then to accomplish their migration using these thermals. And again, without flapping, they go up with the thermal, they glide to the next thermal, go up with the thermal, glide to the next thermal, and continue on. And this diagram came out of Paul Curlinger's book on how birds migrate. Veracruz in Mexico has one of the world's largest raptor counts, and every year between 4 and 7 million raptors are counted. And out of those, TVs, turkey vultures are the most numerous. Now, the count is done in 2 places. One of them is atop a hotel, the Hotel Bienvenido in Cardeo, which is north of the city of Veracruz, about 20 kilometers, 12 miles or so. And then there's a second count, which is conducted to the west because the birds, the migrating birds move, the flights move during the day. They start off in the morning closer to the coast, and as the day progresses, the lines of birds move to the west. And so the second flight, the second count area, in a special building that was erected just for counting in a little town called Chichicaxtla, has the counters up on the top on the 3rd floor. And the 2nd floor is where the people can watch the migration. And on the ground floor is the office and the bookstore and the restrooms. So these are counts from some years previously, 2000, 2005, and you can see that there's between 1 and 3 million, 1.5 and 3 million turkey vultures counted every year. So it's a very numerous bird because if you look at the range map, you'll see that these migrants are only occupying a very small portion of their total range. So it's a very successful species in the Americas. Turkey vultures eat carrion almost exclusively. There are a few reports of them eating something live that can't really fight back. But they feed on from small to large carcasses. The bare head they have is for avoiding germs that can stay with them. So all the pathogens that might be in something like this dead carcass here get on the head, and they're exposed. They can't find a cover, and the ultraviolet will eventually kill them. But they can eat on some rather small stuff too. They don't have to have strong feet to grasp and kill prey because they don't prey. So unlike the red-tailed hawk, which has a very strong feet and sharp talons, turkey vultures don't have that. And here we compare it to a harpy eagle. So they have talons, but they're not very sharp, and they're used to just stand on. Turkey vultures don't build nests. They breed in caves, under thick vegetation, in hollow logs, in abandoned buildings. This one's under a thing of honeysuckle. And they raise their young there. Turkey vultures defecate on their legs to kill the pathogens. That's why it's not for cooling like storks. And they have a feeding hierarchy. So within a group of turkey vultures, there's an alpha bird that feeds first and a beta bird that feeds second, et cetera, et cetera. So when the crop is filled, it shows up as a red bulge on the breast. So this bird has a full crop. So when the alpha bird starts showing that it has a full crop, then the other birds that are still hierarchy, still high in the hierarchy, but less than alpha, start moving in because this bird doesn't want to fight because he's already got his fill. Now I live in the very southern part of Texas in the Rio Grande Valley. And one of our main crops down here is sugarcane. And so sugarcane is raised throughout the year. And then in the autumn, they come in and they burn it first. And you can see these burns from long ways away. And the turkey vultures are somewhat attracted to them, and they'll come over. And then after they burn for a while, the field is harvested, usually a day or 2 or 3 days later. And when they get ready to harvest it, and after they harvest it, sorry, the field is exposed, and it has a lot of burned prey and some that become run over. So we have toasties and mashies here. There's little bits of animals that are in the field. And so the scavengers, like turkey vultures and caracaras, are attracted to that. And they come in and they start feeding. Now here's the harvester, and you can see this part of the field's harvested, and this one is just in the process of harvesting. So they're exposed after harvesting and then eaten by turkey vultures. And but these get stolen by the caracaras and white-tailed hawk. So there's often a lot of tussling going on. So this is a white-tailed hawk, and this is a caracara, white-tailed hawk. Now this is a sequence where this is a dead animal, and this turkey vulture is eating, and this caracara doesn't want, he wants to eat first. So he jumps on the back of the turkey vulture, and he keeps jumping on the back, and the turkey vulture kind of tosses him off because he's real hungry, and this is probably not the usual. And then they both decide to feed together. And this is a younger bird with a dark beak, and so he waits for his turn. So this juvenile turkey vulture is one of 3 that I've captured in cane fields, but I can't ban them because they defecate on their legs, and if you put a band there, they can get infected. Anyhow, I was caught on a trap placed for the white-tailed hawks with live mice as lures. So I've been catching the white-tailed hawks in these sugarcane fields with a trap like this, which is a cage with mice in it and monofilament nooses. So anyhow, these 3 turkey vultures decided that they wouldn't wait until that mouse died. They wanted to eat it right there, as you can see in this little cartoon. Patience, I'm gonna kill something. That's also a Larson cartoon, by the way. Turkey vultures often find carrion by smell because dead animals smell, as we know. And the substance that they're smelling is ethyl mercaptan. But they must see the carrion to be able to see it, to be able to get to it. But they can find it even in the forest because they can smell it above the forest and drop down in the trees and keep flying through the trees until they see other scavengers, or they can actually see the prey itself. The nose, the nares, this opening here is very large, and the olfactory center in the brain is enlarged compared to other birds of prey. TVs are attracted to leaks in gas pipelines. That's because this same chemical is added to gas just so that you could detect gas leak, because natural gas doesn't have any smell. And so linemen can find leaks by following the pipeline and then watching where there are turkey vultures circling over. Now the turkey vultures, the outer primaries are spread when they're gliding. This is to make the wing tips more efficient. There's a bunch of small winglets here, and it reduces induced drag. Now, but the outer 2 or 3, which are pointed up, they can become deformed plastically. And so when the sun comes out, if it's been out, turkey vultures as a group will all of a sudden turn around and either face the sun or more often put their backs to the sun and spread their wings. And it's thought that this is to help straighten out the plastic deformation. It's probably not have anything to do with being wet, although they could spread their wings if they're wet, and but not when the sun comes out like that. But it could also be to kill pathogens that are in the forest, because ultraviolet light will kill many of these nasties. So again, it probably a little bit for drying, removing parasites, but probably more for straightening outer primaries. There was a raptor researcher in England who studied vultures, And he took some Turkey Vulture primaries and he rigged them up and he put some weights on them so that they would deform and let them out. And then he took these deformed feathers out and just put them in the sun and put them in a day with no sun. And they were 10 times to 12 times faster in removing that deformation when the sun was out. Now, the molt of turkey vultures is unusual because in the first molt, when they're juveniles and going into their second pre-basic molt, into adult plumage, they start with the first primary and they go all the way through the 10th, but then they replace the inner 3 primaries a second time. And in subsequent molts, they begin their molt with primary number 4. So this is very different from accipitrid and falconid raptor molts. Turkey vultures, when they're flying, often bring their wings together under their body in something called a flex. And we've illustrated that here. Jerry Ligori in his book talks at a distance actually shows a turkey vulture that he's caught with the wings pointed down in the process of doing one of these flexes. And they often do that. They most often do this when just after they've gotten to the top of a thermal and they start to glide to the next thermal. And again, it's thought to, by doing this, it can remove some of the plastic deformation on the outer primaries. This turkey vulture has a broken wing that did not heal correctly. And wings like that get broken, they can be healed in about 10 to 12 days. So this bird probably spent that time on the ground, most likely in a safe spot so he didn't get predated, but where he could also find some food. And then once the bone merged, healed, but healed crookedly, he got up and started flying. Now they often squabble at the feeding sites, and some of them, probably this is part of the hierarchy determining process. And sometimes it gets pretty vicious. Now we'll look at the black vulture. This bird is about the same size as the turkey vulture, but the wings and the tail are not as large in area, so it has a higher wing loading. Wing beat is much stronger and less flexible. They're generally eastern and southern birds. They don't have a red head. The juveniles have a blackish smooth head. They fly with their wings in just a slight dihedral, and the white on the wings is just in the primaries. They don't have a feeding hierarchy. They're very aggressive to each other, and they very aggressively can gang up on turkey vultures out of big carcass and remove them as a group. So the black vulture is black. The legs are white, a very short tail. The wings are flying in a slight dihedral, and they have a white panel in the wings, compared to the turkey vulture, which is brownish black on the upper sides, with pink legs, a much longer tail, two-tone underwings, and the wings in a strong dihedral when they fly. So here's a black vulture with a red head, and this was taken in Mexico. And so one might think that this might be a hybrid, but it's not. It's just blood from the carcass that he was last in. But there was a published account of a hybrid in the Auk, which was meant as a joke. And if we see this little bottle of Tabasco, we know that that's made by the McElhaney Company, which is out of New Orleans in Louisiana. And they make this hot sauce from chiles they get from Mexico. But in any case, the brothers, the sons of the founder of this were birders. I don't know what they called themselves at the time, bird collectors, because what people did was go out and shoot birds and have them mounted, etc. So some of their friends with the quotes, air quotes, got a mount of a black vulture, and they painted the head red, and they stuck it out in this marsh where these where the McElhaney brothers would see it, but they couldn't get to it. So without them knowing it, the McElhaney brothers, who were diligent scientists at the time, wrote it up in the 1930s in the Auk as a hybrid between a black vulture and turkey vulture. And it wasn't until many years later that a turkey vulture researcher found this and then published the retraction. Now, turkey vultures are being studied. They're being marked with wing tags. Remember, I told you they couldn't be banded. So this is a study in Pennsylvania, out of Hawk Mountain. There's a study in Saskatchewan. There's a study in Washington State, and another one in Southern California, in the Los Angeles area. And so all of these birds are marked with patagio markers. This area here is called the patagio. And again, they can't be banded on their legs. So how were they caught? Well, many of the birds in Saskatchewan were juveniles, and they were caught in buildings like this. This is a black vulture chick, but the turkey vultures were caught the same way. In Washington State, they were caught on carcasses of sea things like seals with a rocket net. In Pennsylvania, it was a walk-in trap. This is on the grounds of Hawk Mountain with roadkill, deer in the center. And the same with California, again, a walk-in or drop-in trap where they can land on the top and they can drop in, but they can't fly out. So the goals of the Hawk Mountain study are to routinely monitor seasoned populations, share information with conservation partners, and use vultures as environmental sentinels, watching to see if their populations go down. Now, the central Saskatchewan study, central Canada study, they did put transmitters on 6 adults. These are satellite transmitters. And they had the summer movements of those 6 adults. And then 4 of them went to Venezuela, where they watched them move down there. They put markers on a lot, 1,200 plus nestlings over 12 years. And at least 3 of these sightings have been done in Texas. This was at Smith Point, Hawkwatch in southern Texas. This is one of their birds known by its patagio marker. In Washington State, the researcher marked 27 TVs. One was sighted on an island in Canada by the patagio marker. And 3 of the TVs moved south into Mexico for the winter. Now, Pete Bloom and Associates have placed 15 VHF and 6 satellite transmitters on turkey vultures, and actually a lot of patagio markers, again, 500. And they have observations of over 3,000 birds. And they wanted to see if they were feeding, where they were feeding, and look and see if they were getting lead poisoning. And this was part of the Condor study. So as a result of this study, 1 PhD and 1 master's finished, and I think this last master's is now finished. And this is where you can find more information on that. Bloom Bio News Turkey Vulture with a tag. Probably also Google it. Here is one of the birds that has a VHF on it and the patagio marker. And this was seen at Prado Park near Chino Hills. So here is a composite map showing the migration using the satellite transmitters from these 4 populations. California's in red, Washington's in white, and many colors for the Saskatchewan study, and then green and yellow for the Hawk Mountain birds. And you can see that the migrations are pretty much north and south, but it's only the Saskatchewan birds and the eastern birds that go into South America. The ones from the west just go down into Mexico and Central America. A recent study shows that turkey vultures and black vultures have microbes in their intestines that would be toxic to other vertebrates. They're just very tolerant of those. They don't have as many microbes for digesting as other raptors do. But this allows them to eat meat that would make all the other scavengers ill or even cause them to die. The bird on the left is very interesting in that it's partial albino. Some of the feathers are white, some of them are normal. These pictures were taken by Michael Pierce, who is the staff photographer of the Wichita, Kansas Eagle newspaper. And Michael saw these birds as he was driving around, took a bunch of pictures of them, and then convinced his editor to write and show the pictures in a Sunday feature, which he did very well. Here's a museum specimen of an almost all white turkey vulture. Here's a turkey vulture with white primaries. Here's one with white secondaries. And this is the bird that I took. The year is not important, but it was on October the 9th in Veracruz, right from the top of the Hotel Bienvenido. 2 years after I took this picture, I got a picture from one of the counters there who was from North America. And it was a picture of a bird that looked very much like this. It was taken on October the 9th. And he says, have you ever seen anything like this? And I wrote back to him with the picture here. And I said, yes, 2 years ago, probably the same bird who has got his timing down pretty well on migration. Now, this bird I took in a sugarcane field while I was trying to band whitetail hawks. And it looks like, after many photographs and watching it, everything, that he's got a feather, a white feather that's sewn at the base of it into the top of the wing. I contacted the bird banding lab and no one had permission, authorization to do this. So somebody probably got the bird and, when it was injured somehow and kept it, but he wanted to mark it so that he would know the bird when it came back. Here's a lovely picture of a dilute plumage bird. The dilute plumage is different from partial albino, meaning that there's still some pigmentation left, and it can be completely like this, or it can be patchy. Now, the residents in South and Central America all have white on their nape. So this is our birds from North America. And here's one from Venezuela. Here's a bird from Brazil and another one from Costa Rica. And all of those have white on the nape. So when the North American migrants come down into those areas of Central America and South America, they're very obvious. In Spanish, they have many common names for turkey vultures, usually in each country or each regional area. In Mexico, closest to us, they're called zopilote or aura. Sergio Sepke, who's writing a field guide for the Raptors of South America, co-authored this chapter in this book. And the chapter is Spanish common names of raptors in Latin America. And Sergio is the lead author. So the book is Neotropical Raptors. And so they recommend the name Aura cabeza rosa. Aura is the scientific name, and cabeza rosa is red head in Spanish. In 1998, the ALU Checklist Committee placed the New World Vultures here in with the storks based on 7 publications that they cited. And those 7 publications really were not very good. One of them, the 7th one, really said they weren't storks. The other 6 have been refuted in the literature. So Carol Griffiths, who is a raptor researcher, particularly involved in taxonomy, and I sent the ALU committee a memo listing the papers that rebutted these. And we also gave other information. We cited recent articles that question the placement there, and we showed that the Caracara is closer to the Falconiformes or both. So the ALU committee, checklist committee, restored the New World Vultures in 2007 and has recently elevated them to the order status. So now they're Cathartiformes. So they're even more formally accepted as different, but still we consider them birds of prey. So again, they reversed the stealth and restored them as raptors. but they're not close to the old world vultures, which are in the Pacific formations. They're closer to eagles and kites, etc. Whereas the king vulture, the California vulture, Turkey vulture, black vulture are different. The next thing I want to talk about is the zone-tail hawk. Now, this is a very specialized buzzard or buteo that has decided to be a mimic of the turkey vulture. So I wrote an article for Birding Magazine and asked this question, and I answered it there pretty well, as yes, this definitely is a mimic. And I give reasons for it in my article in Birding Magazine. So there are conditions for mimicry. So the mimic must occur in much less common than the model. And that's the case. Where the zone-tail hawk occurs, there are turkey vultures, and the zone-tail is much less uncommon. The mimic's range must be entirely within that of the model. That condition is held. And the mimic must associate with the model. And there have been several studies done on this. Ellen Snyder, when she was watching the nest of a prairie falcon in the Huachuca Mountains in Arizona, started watching the zone-tail hawks and watched their association. And sure enough, the zone-tail would be flying around and see a bunch of turkey vultures, and you go over and join it. Further, she also found out and published that when she watched the zone-tails hunting, that if they were with the turkey vultures, they were twice as likely to get prey when they dove as when they were by themselves. So the zone-tail hawk shows a wide white band on the tip of the tail and a dark band on the trailing edge of the wing, which are different from turkey vultures, but at a distance you can't see that. But the juveniles don't have those characters, and they only have white spots which can't be seen. So they're much more like the turkey vulture. And in fact, their wing shape is probably a little bit more like a turkey vulture. Turkey vultures have a pale panel on the upper wing, and zone-tail hawks show that same pale panel on the upper wing. So they've gone really out of their way. So turkey vultures belong to the family of New World vultures, Cathartidae, and now elevated to the order Cathartiformes. There are 3 species in the genus, the Cathartis, the turkey vulture, lesser yellow-headed vulture, and the greater yellow-headed vultures. The other 4 vultures in the New World vultures, the Cathartiformes, are in separate genera. Okay, so in the book I wrote, a field guide for the raptors of Mexico and Central America, here we cover the lesser yellow-headed vulture, which has also been called the savanna vulture. And it occurs only in the New World and only in Mexico and Central America. And it has a very different head color. It looks somewhat similar to turkey vulture, but they're black above. They have no brownish tones in there. They're a little bit smaller than the turkey vulture, and they have proportionally longer wings so that when they perch, the wings reach beyond the tail tip. They also smell like turkey vultures do. So both the turkey vulture and the lesser yellow-headed vulture can find their prey by smelling. And here is again more from that field guide showing the range of the lesser yellow-headed vulture and then comparison with turkey vulture. There's this is some pictures of them in flight. They occur in wet savannas. The head is multicolored, not only yellow, and they have a sense of smell. And the plumage is more black, and the wingtips extend beyond the tail tip when they perch, which isn't true. And they have white rays on the primaries. The juvenile is, the plumage is a little bit more black-brown and not as blackish on turkey vultures, and they have a gray face, not a dusky face. And again, the wingtips extend beyond the tail tip. Now, there's a 3rd species in this genus that occurs in the Amazon basin, and the greater yellow-headed vulture, which is larger than the other two, but it also has a sense of smell. It's overall a very darker bird with darker primaries, and it's only in South America. And here's Sergio, and this is from the plate of the heads of the three species of Cathartes, lesser yellow-headed at the bottom, Turkey Vulture, and then greater yellow-headed up there. And this artwork is by Freddie Pellinger, and he's still working on the field guide. So, Turkey Vultures. I hope I've given you a better appreciation of this interesting scavenger, which fills a very necessary niche in our ecosystem. And actually, they're really a pleasure to watch flying around. And the only thing I recommend you not do is to handle them, because I have done this before. And what they do is, it's a defense mechanism, is they they vomit up what's in their stomach into the mouth, and then they throw their heads around, and this becomes, gets on you. And the times when I have handled them like that, I've had to throw my clothes away because a simple washing in a washing machine doesn't remove that smell. So thanks for your attention.
Wow, this is really great information. So one of the questions is, how did you first get interested in raptors?
That's a good one. I'll give you the shortened version. I was a bird bander, and I banded albirds. And a colleague of mine who helped me showed me an article on building a trap for catching birds of prey called the Valtetri. And I built one, and he and I went out for a weekend, and we caught a dozen kestrels. And it was all downhill after that. I just fell in love with raptors.
Got hooked. Great. And then you had mentioned turkey vultures are sentinels, and how is the population? Is it stable or?
Yep, right now everything looks stable. So there's nothing there that either virus-wise or pollution-wise that is causing a problem. The only species we have problems with nowadays are California condors and golden, and to a lesser extent bald eagles, because of lead poisoning. Mm-hmm. And that is being addressed very strongly.
Okay, good. Another question: do African vultures find food by smell or sight only?
No, by sight only. Only the Cathartes, only those three species have this olfactory sense. Now, I think that some species in the New World, the Old World, and particularly the milvus kites, like the black kite, I suspect that they have some sense of smell, because when we were ending raptors in Israel, somebody dumped a whole bunch of meat that was in cardboard boxes. Probably their freezer went out or something in a dump area. And the kites were able to find them and break open these boxes, even though they couldn't see the meat inside. And I suspect that they could smell it. And it was very strong, by the way. The smell was very strong, the rotten meat smell.
So if these have local population, if you have lots of local populations in South America, when you have these migrations going down, what does that do to is there a lot of competition then between the interspecies competition with the migrants?
That's an interesting observation, because when they went down and started watching North American birds come in, the North American birds are larger because of Bergman's rule. And so they were supplanting the natives down there. So they were changing the hierarchy. So it definitely didn't, the North American birds coming in did not benefit the South American birds or the Central American birds. But there's enough food around, I guess.
And another question we have is, how common or rare are the white, the turkey vultures that have white? I don't know if any of us have ever seen that.
Not very common. Yeah, it's not like partial albino
Okay,
red-tailed hawks, which are fairly common and occur just about everywhere. Yeah, I've probably not, I've not seen that many. And I've seen a lot of turkey vultures.
and someone asked, I thought another reason they have bald heads is for cleanliness. Feathered heads would be a mess the way they feed.
Yes. Well, it's not just cleanliness. It's the fact that the pathogens could get in there and multiply and then get on the skin and yeah, it's just yeah, it just makes a lot of sense.
Right.
And a lot of scavengers have this too, black vultures. Yeah.
Eleanor, you had your hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
And not a question, but an observation. The fields that were burned and the vultures went in afterward, I assume they were eating the dead bugs that were left behind. Is that
No.
right, Bill?
No, they were eating the dead animals. When the
Oh.
when the field was burned, a lot of them were burned and were toasties. And when they after they burned it, they harvested it. They burned the field to remove a lot of the leafy vegetation. Makes it more efficient to harvest the sugarcane. When the sugarcane is harvested by great big machines with tractors and trailers, and they also run over some stuff too. But it also exposes the field so that the hawks can even find some live ones there. But no, they're feeding on the dead things, mostly the burnt stuff.
Well, I was making a connection with the Swainson's hawk migration that occurs in Borrego Springs. And with that migration, there are lots of turkey vultures that kettle in with the Swainsons, and they land in the trees. And the Swainsons are actually after the grasshoppers and the caterpillars. So I'm just wondering if the vultures end up eating the same thing that the Swainson's hawks are eating.
Probably not. Yeah, I've seen that a couple of times, couple of days. But yeah, their feeding ecology is very different. No, I think they're going to stick to dead things.
Oh, okay. There must be a lot of dead things out there in Borrego then.
No, they can migrate and they can feed, feed for a couple of days somewhere and then migrate and not feed for a couple of days.
Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah.
And a follow-up question is, what time of the year does the sugarcane harvest occur?
That's just in the winter, starting in October to end of February.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit about the difference between a pale morph and an albino?
Well, okay, so I use the word partial albino.
Okay.
And what a partial albino is, it's a bird where some of the feathers are white and some of them are normal. Now, an albino bird has all white feathers and it doesn't have any pigmentation in the eyes, the beak, the skin, etc. Those are very rare. I don't know of any turkey vultures that are albino, but a few of them are partial albino. A pale morph is just the birds that are not a dark morph or a rufous morph.
And
but
then
they're not. But they don't have white feathers.
okay, and we've also heard the term leucistic. Would that be like a partial albino?
No, leucistic. Yeah, this is a very misused term. Leucistic actually means whitish. So albino, it could be albino with that. But what it really means in definition is a dilute plumage bird or amelanistic bird. And that is where there is a reduction in the amount of pigmentation. And so instead of being white or partially white with some white feathers, they're kind of coffee au lait or pale or brown. And that can be, I showed you one bird there where it was pretty much pale gray all over. Turkey vulture. That was a leucistic bird of blue plumage. Yeah, and anyhow, there's a lot of confusion between them, and the mechanism is different because in red-tailed hawks, they only have partial albino in adults, but they have leucistic or blue plumage in both adults and juveniles. So it's not the same mechanism, and they don't look the same. And you can Google it.
Thank you. Looks like those are all the questions in the chat. Does anybody have any other questions? If they do, you can unmute yourself and ask it. Now's your chance. Bill's the leading authority on all things Raptor. You can pick his brain.
Hey, Joni. We came in late. I got the wrong time. Is this recorded on your homepage?
Yes, it is.
We can watch it then.
Yes.
The short period that we've watched, it's been wonderful. Thank you very much. So we'll be looking this one up to watch it.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for coming.
Nice.
We really appreciate it.
Nice talking to you.
Okay, you take care.
Hey, good night.
All right, bye-bye, everybody.
You.